every morning with drive. Being on the grind, know I had to survive. We had to win. Started from the dirt and the rubble. I had to be the needle that was popping your bubble.
Hello and welcome into the Rookie Prospect Profile Series, a Zilla Fantasy Elite production. Today we're going to be looking at tight end Ja'Tavion Sanders within the rookie tight end machine learning models. Is Ja'Tavion Sanders poised for fantasy greatness or destined to fade into obscurity? Our machine learning models hold the answers. Stay tuned for the verdict. Tip Freeman was drafted pick 101 overall, the first pick of the fourth round by the Carolina Panthers. Played college football for the Texas Longhorns, earning all-conference honors in 2022 and 2023. Came into the league as a very highly touted prospect. Then went through the draft process, the NFL Draft Combine. His numbers weren't very good. People were expecting him to be very athletic, but it ended up not being the case. Comes in at 6'4", 245 pounds, which is a decent amount there. But the vertical jump barely beat the 20s, so I was at 30 for the vertical jump, so barely made it out of the 20s there. Ran a 4.69 in the 40-yard dash, which isn't particularly great either. It's not terrible, but you'd like to see that a little bit better considering what people were thinking when he was coming in. Broad jump at 114 inches means his burst score was really low. 30-inch vertical, 114-inch broad jump are pretty poor scores. College dominator rating at 15.6. Not very good. College target share 16.8 is halfway decent. He does have 10 and 1/8 inch hands, which is decent. Only bench pressed 8 in the bench press. So this guy just not athletic, which is a big letdown. It seems like, okay, well, this guy, number 2 tight end in the class, he goes through this particular process and it's like, well, I don't know, maybe not. Doesn't look like he is all that athletic. So we know that the models love athletic tight ends, especially fast tight ends with a large speed score. So what is he going to look like? Let's get into his year one numbers. And we see here he was the 4th drafted tight end. So his mean and median at the 5th ranked, not all that surprising, but 3.6 and 3.49 fantasy points per game isn't anything to write home about. That's not someone that you're going to want to start in your fantasy lineups. Maximum output at 9.59 is the 3rd best in the class, and that's a pretty solid outcome for a tight end, especially for a rookie. So looking at the 3 to 4 range for tight ends in their rookie season, who hit that? Well, there's a massive amount there, so we'll kind of narrow it down to maybe 3.4 to 3.75. Who was hitting that particular range as a tight end? You got names like Tegan Quitoriano, Jarrell Adams, Dalton Schultz, Jonnu Smith, Brock Wright, Logan Thomas, Tyler Kroft, Blake Bell, and Gavin Escobar. Got some pretty interesting names in there. Logan Thomas but came in as a quarterback. Jonnu Smith kind of has the hype behind him. And Dalton Schultz, we saw have some pretty good fantasy seasons already in his career. So some interesting names there in his first season. Not bad considering his mean and median wasn't all that great. Maximum output at 9.59. That's actually really, really good. That's getting into the top 10 of the last 11 draft classes. Pat Fryermuth hit 9.48 and was the 8th best in the last 11 draft classes. Dalton Kincaid last year at 9.39 was the 9th best. Then a little bit above that, Hunter Henry at 10 total fantasy points per game, hovering in that range. So top 10 outcome if he hits his ceiling with the Panthers. Not entirely sure if that's going to be possible. They got quite a bit of target competition there now in their wide receiver room. Deontay Johnson. Last year, Jonathan Mingo, 2nd rounder. This year, they took Xavier Legette in the 1st round. Still got Adam Thielen there. I just don't think there's enough that Ja'Tavion Sanders can do to earn targets in his first season with all of those guys there. I don't think he's going to be high in the pecking order. So I think the mean median range is probably pretty accurate here in his first season. Let's get into year 2. How's he look in this particular model? And he takes a slight jump up. Nothing to write home about here. Still hovering around the 4 fantasy points per game range. And we see his ranks now drop into the 6th best in the class for the mean and median. Maximum output actually at 9.57 is the 8th best in the class. Let's go look at maybe that 3.8 to 4.3 fantasy point per game range for tight ends and see who's in there. We have Jack Doyle Darren Waller, Nick Vanette, Josiah DeGuara, Harrison Bryant, Gavin Escobar yet again, Noah Gray, Tyler Higbee, and Levine Toilolo. Some interesting names in there yet again. We have Darren Waller, who ended up coming out of nowhere to be super good. And Tyler Higbee, we know, had at least one really good fantasy season. So we see some names in his median output that maybe started off a little bit slow in their career, but ended up being pretty good later on. Let's go look at that maximum output at 9.57. Guys hovering in that range are inside the top 20 in the last 11 seasons. Pat Fryermuth again, Eric Ebron, David Njoku, Dallas Goedert, Crockett Gilmore, and Richard Rodgers, all in their second fantasy season, hit in between 9.26 and 9.9 fantasy points per game. All right, so we saw a little bit of growth here. Seems like Jatavian Sanders has some names in his particular mean and median range that end up doing really well in future years. Are we going to see some of that in year 3? A little bit of growth here. Well, unfortunately, we see him take a step back into year 3. So was really stagnant from year 1 to year 2, a little increase, and now we see him take a step back into the 3 range. We see his mean and median rank in the class is at 9 now. Maximum output 10.57 is 8th best in the class. The model just doesn't seem to think Jatavian Sanders is really going to grow or do much in these first 3 seasons. He's always going to be in between 3 to 4 fantasy points per game. And his cohorts seem to be getting better and better as his ranks keep going down and down. There are only 12 tight ends that were drafted and that we'll be looking at within the model this season. So keep that in mind. He's pretty far down there. Getting into that 3rd year tight end and somebody in between maybe the 3 to 4 range, who is hitting that in their 3rd season. We actually have a ton of wide receivers in between 3 and 4 fantasy points per game. I will just list them all off here. Starting at 3.09, going all the way up to 3.92. Ross Dwelly, Sethan Carter, Josh Hill, Albert O, Nick Boyle, Jack Doyle, Luke Wilson, Jeremy Sprinkle, Harrison Bryant, Brevin Jordan, Seth DeValve, Tommy Tremble, Austin Safarian-Jenkins, Will Dissly, Chris Gregg, Will Tye, and Durham Smythe. Not people that you have ever wanted to put into your fantasy lineup outside of maybe Albert O, and he wasn't all that great to begin with. Unfortunately for him, in year 3, not looking too great. That maximum output at 10.57, getting into the top 15 out of the last 11 draft classes, so you're going to see some good names here. Dallas Goedert at 10.58, super close to that, was the 13th best ever in the last 11 draft classes. Austin Hooper, 10.1, Noah Fant, 9.94, Mike Gesicki, 10.62, Dawson Knox, 10.94. So that's the range of people that you're looking at if he hits his ceiling outcome, which hopefully for the Panthers and anybody who drafts Jatavian Sanders, that is the case. But it doesn't look like the machine learning model particularly cares for Jatavian Sanders' profile here. Will that change into year 4, or will we see more of the same from him? And unfortunately, we see more of the same, actually another drop down. As I said, there's 12 tight ends in the class. Into year 4, it's saying Jatavian Sanders' profile is the 11th best in the class. It's hovering around 3 to 4 fantasy points per game here in the mean and median. So 3.48 mean, 3.03 median output. Maximum output at 13.17 is the 7th best in the class. And you can see the CV there, 65.2, one of the worst ones in the entire class out of all 4 years. Kind of a lot of variation or volatility in this particular profile, but looking at the bar graphs on the bottom, you can kind of tell most of his predictions are actually coming in around the 25th percentile, which is below 2 fantasy points per game at 1.79. Probably just not somebody that I'm going to draft ever based off of this particular profile, but let's go look at what year 4 players were hovering in that range of about 3 fantasy points per game. And these tight ends were hovering all between 2.7 and 3.2 fantasy points per game. J.P. Holtz, Troy Nicholas, Adam Shaheen, Bronson Kafusi, James O'Shaughnessy, Gavin Escobar, and Jordan Akins. Woof, woof, woof. Not good there. And that's if he's at his mean and median. We can see those bucket predictions basically say he's probably closer to 2 fantasy points per game as the most likely bucket for him to fall into. Maximum output at 13.17 though is really good. That's getting almost into the top 5 here. Zach Ertz in his 4th season hit 13.1 and he was the 6th best tight end. Just above him was Travis Kelce's fourth year at 13.8, TJ Hawkinson 12.67, and then Jordan Reed 14. So hovering right in that range if he hits his ceiling. Based on his profile, I just don't think he's athletic enough. I think he's going to be hovering more around the low end, and not somebody that I'm ever going to draft based off of this particular profile. When I heard that he didn't test all that well, I was like, I'm kind of out on this guy. His peripheral numbers weren't even all that good in terms of what they were doing in that offense in Texas. He has Xavier Worthy and Adonai Mitchell there as well to compete for targets. He just didn't earn a lot of targets. When he did get them, he was pretty decent with the actual ball in his hand, but didn't look like he's going to be a target earner. This certainly doesn't like his opportunities to produce in fantasy. So maybe somebody that you're going to want to avoid in your rookie drafts. Hopefully this can help you out and avoid him and maybe use a draft pick on somebody a little bit better than him in your drafts. All right, that's going to do it for today's rookie prospect profile on Ja'Tavion Sanders. This is presented by Zilla Fantasy Elite. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.